Zevi blinked, her four eyes open, the jarring sound of Rael's alarm slicing through her peaceful slumber. She let out a low hiss, feeling her scales vibrate in irritation. Why humans needed such an awful noise to wake up was beyond her. It wasn't the first time she pondered this strange habit. Every species she knew had some kind of internal clock that woke them up precisely when needed, yet humans needed a mechanical device that clattered so obnoxiously. It was just one of the many oddities she had come to accept after living with Rael for the past year. Rael, the human in question, lay sprawled beside her, completely oblivious to the blaring alarm. His arm was draped lazily across her midsection, his body a furnace of heat under the thick comforter they shared. Zevi tried to gently peel his arm off, but Rael tightened his grip, murmuring something incoherent as he buried his face deeper into her scales. She rolled her eyes, a smile tugging at her lips despite her frustration. "Rael," she whispered, giving him a gentle nudge. Nothing. She nudged him harder. "Rael, turn off the alarm." With a groan, Rael flung out his hand, slapping the clock with a thud that finally silenced the noise. He mumbled something about 5 more minutes before snuggling back into her warmth. Zevi sighed, thinking once again about how strange it was that humans loved the cold. Rael always insisted on turning the temperature down, leaving her to rely on the blanket to stay warm. Despite their differences, there was something comforting about his presence. He was like a small sun in her bed, radiating heat and making the cold room bearable. As she untangled herself from him and sat up, Zevi reflected on how bizarre human biology was. How could they survive in such cold conditions and still produce so much body heat? She had spent years studying xenobiology, and nothing in her studies had prepared her for the daily surprises of living with a human. Zevi shuffled to the small kitchen, her mind drifting to the topic of today's lecture. Her students had been eagerly awaiting it. Today was all about humans, and she could already hear the excited whispers and questions in her mind. The intercom buzzed softly, reminding her of the time. She grabbed a cup of coffee, another human obsession she had reluctantly grown to appreciate, and made her way out the door, ready to face a classroom full of curious aliens. The classroom was already buzzing when Zevi arrived. Her students, an eclectic mix of species from across the galaxy, sat in various postures, some hovering above their seats, others sprawled out in ways that defied gravity. As usual, the room quieted down when she entered, all eyes turning to her with anticipation. "Good morning, everyone," Zevi began, her voice echoing slightly in the large lecture hall. "As promised, today we're going to discuss the biological oddities of humans." A murmur of excitement rippled through the class. This was a topic that always fascinated them. Despite their widespread presence in the galaxy, humans remained an enigma to many. "Let's start with strength," Zevi continued, pulling up a holographic display showing a human lifting a heavy object. Humans are deceptively strong for their size, thanks to their dense muscle fibers. What's even more interesting is their brain's limitation on their own strength. They only use about 70% of their muscle power under normal conditions. A hand shot up. It belonged to Kerry, a curious Yul from the moon of Veth. Why limit themselves like that? Wouldn't they be stronger without that restraint? Zevi smiled. In theory, yes. But without that limitation, they would risk tearing their muscles or damaging their bones. It's a safety measure, one that most species don't have because we evolved differently. However, she paused for effect, knowing this was the part that always captivated them. In moments of extreme stress, humans can override that limit. It's called hysterical strength. She tapped the display again, showing a grainy video of a human woman lifting a vehicle to save a child trapped underneath. The class gasped in unison, their various appendages twitching in disbelief. "That's not normal, right?" asked Kra, a large, blue-skinned warrior from the planet Telmor. "I mean, lifting a vehicle." "No, it's not normal," Zevi said with a grin. "But humans have this remarkable ability to access reserves of strength when it's needed most. In situations where adrenaline is involved, They can do things that seem impossible. The room was filled with astonished murmurs as the students tried to wrap their minds around this new revelation. Zevi enjoyed these moments. She had once been just as surprised as they were, but now, after living with Rael, she had come to expect the unexpected when it came to humans. The next slide showed a sleeping human, their chest rising and falling steadily. "Now, let's move on to pheromones," Zevi announced. The room grew even quieter. This was a sensitive subject, especially for some species that were more affected by human biology. "Humans release a lot of pheromones when they sleep," she said, pulling up a chart that compared pheromone levels across various species. "For most species, this isn't a big deal. But for others, well, it can cause some interesting reactions." Carrie raised her hand again. "What do you mean by interesting?" Zevi chuckled. "For prey species, human pheromones can trigger a fear response. It's similar to what they feel when they're in the presence of a predator. For predator species, the response is, let's just say, more complicated." She hesitated, unsure how to phrase the next part delicately. "In some cases, it can cause a sense of attraction. Nothing dangerous, but distracting." The class erupted into nervous laughter, and Zevi couldn't help but smile. "Trust me, I've experienced it firsthand. It takes some getting used to." Zevi recounted the morning she woke up surrounded by Rael's overwhelming scent, her instincts battling with her logical mind. It had taken months to acclimate to living with him, but even now, there were moments when she felt her pulse quicken in ways she couldn't entirely explain. The students listened in rapt attention, some exchanging knowing glances. It was clear they were both fascinated and a little disturbed by the strange effects of human biology. Zevi couldn't blame them. After all, humans were one of the most unpredictable species in the galaxy. Zevi stood at the front of the class, watching her students scribble down notes or tap away on their data pads. The previous discussions about human pheromones had caused quite a stir, but now it was time to move on to something even more bewildering: adrenaline. "Now let's talk about adrenaline," Zevi began, pulling up a new slide that displayed a human sprinting away from danger. Humans have an extraordinary ability to access vast amounts of energy and strength through this chemical reaction. When adrenaline kicks in, they can push themselves beyond what's biologically possible for most species. Rael had told her stories of his people's near-miraculous feats under pressure, stories of soldiers who could keep fighting despite severe injuries or mothers who lifted fallen debris off their children. While these stories had seemed like tall tales at first, Zevi had witnessed similar events during her time with the human military. She'd seen Rael, small and unassuming, turn into a force of nature when the situation demanded it. A hologram flickered into life on the screen behind her, showing a human soldier in combat, his movements quick and precise as he dodged enemy fire. In high-stress situations, humans produce large amounts of adrenaline, which enhances their strength, speed, and reaction times. This is what's known as the fight-or-flight response. Most species have something similar, but humans, well, they take it to another level. One of her students, a Telmarin named Vex, raised a hand. His voice was deep, almost vibrating through the air. "But what happens afterward? Can they keep going forever?" Zevi shook her head. "No, that's the catch. After the adrenaline rush wears off, humans crash. Their bodies can only sustain such intense effort for a limited time before they exhaust themselves. In fact, humans often pass out after prolonged exposure to adrenaline. It's like running a machine at full power for too long. It can't last indefinitely." She paused for a moment, recalling one particular battle where Rael had fought alongside her. The adrenaline had surged through him, turning him into a relentless combatant, but when the battle was over, he had collapsed, barely able to move. "But," Zevi added with a sly smile, "that short burst of power can be devastating to their enemies. During the Darien Wars, humans were known for tearing through enemy lines with a ferocity that left many species shaken. Their ability to fight beyond the limits of pain and fatigue made them feared on the battlefield." The room was silent as the students absorbed this information. They had all heard stories of human warriors, but hearing it from someone who had seen it firsthand was a different experience. Xavier could see the admiration and the fear in their eyes. Humans are unpredictable, Xavier continued. You never know when one of them will push themselves beyond their limits, and that's what makes them so dangerous. It's not just their strength or their speed, it's their will to survive, no matter the cost. As the lesson continued, Xavier shifted the topic to another fascinating aspect of human biology, their resilience. She pulled up a diagram of the human immune system, noting how different it was from the more delicate systems of many species in the room. Humans have an incredibly robust immune system, Xavier began, gesturing to the holographic image of a human body. Their bodies run at such a high temperature that most pathogens are killed off before they can do any damage. This is why humans can survive in environments that would be deadly to many other species. A Korean student raised her hand, her scaled fingers trembling slightly. Is that why we have to take so many injections when we're on Earth? Xavier nodded. Exactly. Earth is home to some of the most dangerous pathogens in the galaxy, but humans seem to thrive in it. Other species need constant inoculations to protect themselves from diseases that humans barely notice. The class murmured in amazement. For many of them, Earth was a death world, a place too dangerous to live on, but humans called it home. Of course, Xavier continued, this resilience comes with a price. Humans are constantly exposed to dangerous environments, which forces their immune systems to stay on high alert. They've evolved to adapt to almost anything, from deadly viruses to extreme weather conditions. This is why they can live on planets that would kill most species in a matter of hours. Another student, a tiny Nyrax with shimmering green skin, raised her hand. But if they're so strong, why do they get sick at all? Xavier chuckled softly. Good question. Humans are strong, but they're not invincible. When they do get sick, it's often because they've been exposed to something completely new, something their bodies haven't adapted to yet. And when humans do get sick, well, let's just say it's an event. She thought back to the time Rael had caught a common cold. For days, he had been a miserable mess, sniffling and coughing in a way that made Xavier question how humans could survive their own biology. But, Xavier continued, what really sets humans apart is their ability to bounce back. They heal faster than many species, and they have an incredible tolerance for pain. Even when they're injured, they keep going. It's this combination of resilience and stubbornness that makes them such formidable allies and enemies. Her students seemed captivated, their eyes wide with awe and disbelief. Xavier knew how they felt. She had been just as astonished when she first started working with humans. Despite their fragile appearance, they were one of the toughest species she had ever encountered. Xavier paused for a moment, watching the eager faces of her students. They had learned so much today, yet the most important lesson was still to come. She smiled softly, knowing this was the part that always left a lasting impression. There's one more thing about humans that we haven't discussed, Xavier said, her voice calm but filled with respect. It's the thing that truly makes them unique among all the species I've encountered. The room fell silent as her students leaned in, waiting for her to continue. It's their curiosity, Xavier said simply. Humans have an insatiable need to explore, to question, and to learn. They never stop pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Even when the odds are stacked against them, they keep moving forward, driven by this endless desire to understand the universe. She tapped a button on her datapad, and the hologram behind her changed to show a human astronaut, floating in the vast expanse of space, staring out at the distant stars. This is why humans have spread so far across the galaxy, Xavier continued. It's not just their strength or their resilience, it's their determination to explore the unknown. They're always asking questions, always searching for something more, and that's what makes them truly dangerous. Her students were silent, their expressions thoughtful as they processed this final revelation. Xavier could see that they understood now why humans were so respected and so feared throughout the galaxy. They may be unpredictable, Zevi concluded, and their biology may seem strange to us, but in the end, it's their curiosity, their drive, and their resilience that make humans one of the most remarkable species in the galaxy. The class remained quiet for a few moments, then one by one, her students began to applaud. Zeki smiled, feeling a sense of pride as she wrapped up the lesson. As she packed up her things, Zevi thought about Rael and all the times he had surprised her with his strength, his stubbornness, and his insatiable curiosity. There was still so much about humans that she didn't fully understand, but one thing was certain: life with a human was never boring. And that, Zevi thought with a smile, was what made them so fascinating.